Merry Christmas. I'm Mike Emanuel in Washington with ongoing special coverage of the breaking news out of Nashville today. Early this morning, an explosion rocked downtown Nashville. A 10-block radius has been closed off around the site of the blast in Nashville's famous entertainment district. At least 3 people taken to the hospital, several buildings damaged, and we're getting more details by the minute. Let's go live to correspondent Rich Edson for more. Good evening, Rich.
Yeah, good evening, Mike. And there is a major national law enforcement response and investigation in downtown Nashville after an RV blew up at 6:30 this morning. An explosion police say is deliberate. Police also say officers responded around 5:30 this morning to a report of gunfire, and when they arrived, they found an RV playing a recording warning that a bomb would detonate in 15 minutes. Police say they cleared the area, called the bomb squad, and soon after, the RV exploded, knocking one officer off their feet. And Metro Nashville police say they now have a photo, tweeting, quote, "This is the RV that exploded on 2nd Ave North this morning. It arrived on 2nd Ave at 1:22 a.m. Have you seen this vehicle in our area, or do you have information about it? Please contact us via Crime Stoppers, the number 615-742-7463, or online at the FBI field office in Nashville or the ATF. Police say it is unclear if anyone was in that RV, and as a precaution, they've brought in dogs to search for other devices.
We're sweeping the downtown area just as a precaution to make sure that everyone is safe and that any service that needed, we can provide that. And so with that said, we don't feel there's any concern in the downtown area of anything else right now.
Authorities say 3 people went to the hospital, though none are in critical condition. Witnesses say the explosion shattered glass, knocked down trees, and shook and damaged buildings. Police say they've sealed off the area and are reviewing camera footage. The Department of Justice says early this morning, the acting Attorney General, Jeff Rosen, directed federal resources to Nashville. The FBI is leading the investigation with the ATF and local police. Other law enforcement officials are expected to arrive in the coming days. The driver parked the RV in downtown in a major tourist area and in front of the AT&T building. AT&T says the explosion damaged its facilities, affecting service for some of its customers in the area. Nashville Airport Authority says it halted flights this afternoon because of the disruption. Some have resumed, but they say they still have issues there. Also, several nearby cities have reported their 911 lines are down. Mike?
Still so many questions hours after this blast, Rich, and it's miraculous that more people were not killed or wounded. Clearly, the attacker did not want a mass casualty attack and to kill a lot of people, right?
Right, exactly. You look at the timing of this. This is downtown. If you've ever been to Nashville, this is very close to just the heart of the downtown where there are bars, there are restaurants. You can go to restaurants in Nashville. They are 50% occupied because of COVID. But this is something that, according to police, the vehicle arrived a little after 1:20 this morning. And then by 5:30, there are reports of guns fired downtown. It's unclear who called in the warning, if there were gunshots, but that's what police say that they were responding to downtown. They got there, and about an hour later, that's when this explosion went off. There is residential housing downtown, so police did have to clear people who were living downtown, hotels, bars, and restaurants. Not necessarily the bars and restaurants are going to be opened at 5:30, 6:30 in the morning on Christmas Day, but still, the timing of all this is an area that can be very busy and was not at this time.
Rich Edson starting us off tonight. Rich, many thanks. President Trump is spending his Christmas in Florida, and we're told he has been briefed on the blast in Nashville. Correspondent Mark Meredith is in West Palm Beach with the latest from the president. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening to you, Mike. The White House says the president was briefed not long after the explosion. In a statement, he offered his support to law enforcement, also offered some prayers to those people that were injured in the blast. The president has not spoken on camera about what happened in Nashville, and we don't think he's going to. The White House already calling a lid around 3:30, indicating that he's not expected to make any on-camera statements to the press. There also have not been any tweets from the president about this explosion. We have heard from the new acting attorney general, though. He put out a statement this morning. This is what the Justice Department says. Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen was briefed on the Nashville incident this morning and directed that all DOJ resources be made available to assist in the investigation. About an hour ago, the president-elect also put out a statement about this incident. We're hearing from Joe Biden. President-elect Biden has been briefed on the explosion in Nashville. The president-elect and Dr. Biden thank all the first responders working today in response to the incident and wish those who were injured a speedy recovery. We know the FBI has taken the lead on the investigation, and members of Tennessee's congressional delegation, they have been speaking out saying they'll be offering all of the resources that they can to the state and local officials on the ground in Tennessee. But, Mike, we'll be waiting to see if the president has any more reaction to this as the night goes on. Mike?
We expect President Trump to get more briefings on the situation in Nashville. Mark, there's also the huge policy issue involving legislation passed by Congress. You've got a COVID relief package, about $900 billion or so, and then you've also got this omnibus package to keep the government running from late night Monday night through the end of this fiscal year. Any sense at this point if the president will let us know if he plans to approve or veto the stimulus package Congress sent his way?
I guess that's the $900 billion question right now. And no, there's not been any indication from the president what he plans to do about this, whether veto or sign it. But there is a lot of questions about what this will mean, because it's not only stimulus checks that are tied to us. As you mentioned, the government faces another potential shutdown if this deal is not reached and the president sends this back to Congress. What's interesting here is this was a deal that was negotiated by his own Treasury Secretary. There was no indication until late Tuesday that the president was not going to sign this. He has not said he will veto it, but he's simply leaving open that possibility. He says he wants the checks to be a lot larger that would go out to some Americans. Congressional Republicans are not likely to support that idea. But the president also was not happy with the amount of foreign aid included in the larger government budget, Mike. So we'll wait to see what the president chooses to do next. Mike?
Mark Meredith in West Palm Beach, Florida. Mark, thanks a lot. Let's turn now to an eyewitness of the situation there in Nashville. Buck McCoy lives near the area of the explosion. He joins us live now with his story. Good evening, Buck. So let's start with what you hear about 5:30 or so this morning.
Well, I was sleeping in, and I heard some gunfire coming from outside the window on 2nd Avenue. I live just above the old spaghetti factory on 2nd Avenue. So I got up, looked out the window, didn't see anything. I saw that there was some snow on the cars, so I went back into my sleeping area of my studio apartment and heard some more gunfire. I didn't get up this time. I just said, well, I'm just nothing I can do about it. And then within about 10 minutes, I heard and felt the most incredible explosion ever. It completely demolished my entire apartment. Everything I owned was just ripped apart. The windows were blown into the second part of the studio apartment, and my door was actually completely unhinged and spent wide open. I gathered myself. I got some clothes on, tried to figure out what the heck could possibly be going on. And then I just moved down the hallway and started videotaping because I didn't know what we were going to have another explosion. So I just videotaped what was going on. I streamed that live. And when I got downstairs into the street, it was just a nightmare. It looked like a movie. All the windows had been blown out. The cars were engulfed in fire across the street. People were coming out. They were in shock. They were holding their animals, a few things. It was just unbelievable.
Christmas morning, first thing, crack of dawn, and you get this alarming, panicked wake up. Can you talk about some interaction with you and your neighbors?
Well, I saw some people coming out crying, and another person was comforting his girlfriend, and she had her dog. And I was downstairs at that time, and I said, well, I got to go back up and get my cat because this is just, can't stay here any longer. But I couldn't get her. She was freaked out. You know, animals are. So the firemen came up the stairwell at that point and told me I had to leave immediately and that I couldn't take anything with me, that I almost had to just run out of there. So I had to leave her. I don't know what's going on. They won't let us anywhere near what's going on over there. So I was just able to get out of there with the clothes on my back. And if I'd have been standing in front of that window during the explosion, there's just no way anyone could have survived that.
So, Buck, give us a sense, what are you going to do? I mean, you talked about your apartment being trashed, your belongings being destroyed. How do you pick up the pieces?
Wow, this is such a crazy thing to happen because, we're such a small little city here in Nashville. We've got our little honky-tonks and our community of musicians, and we're all kind of a tight-knit group of people. but there's literally nothing left of my apartment. Every single piece of equipment, guitar, everything I owned was just completely ruined. So I really don't know. At this point, I'm going to just take it moment by moment, and I've got some great friends that are keeping me at their place right now, just down the street from where Ground Zero is, and I'm just going to have to take it day by day here and figure it out. But I am so glad I had a Christmas angel and that I was not near that window. And it's just amazing nobody got killed. It's just amazing.
Buck McCoy, we thank you for sharing your story with us. We wish you the best. We're glad you're safe and healthy, sir.
Thank you.
Let's get analysis of what's happened in Nashville from the experts. Former Secret Service Supervisory Special Agent and former DHS Advisor Charles Marino, and Ted Williams is a former homicide detective. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, Mike.
Charles, your thoughts initially based on what you've seen and what you've heard so far?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, and I think what everybody else is seeing, is that this investigation is being worked vigorously, especially the crime scene right now. The FBI and ATF are taking the lead here through the JTTF infrastructure, the Joint Terrorism Task Force. This is a nationwide network of task forces consisting of federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, which allows the FBI to quickly scale investigations based on any investigative leads that may come out of Nashville related to this case across the country. They're looking for identifying information right now. We're starting to see surveillance video come out in the case of the RV. We're also starting to see the identification of things like license plates, vehicle identification numbers, the materials that may have been used here, as well as eyewitness accounts like the previous report you just had.
Ted, your thoughts at this point from what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've read about this incident?
Well, Mike, clearly what has happened here can be considered and defined as a Christmas miracle. Here it is at 1:22 a.m. in the morning. There is this RV that's seen in that neighborhood on 2nd Street there. As you know, the law enforcement has put out a picture of that vehicle. They are trying to get the public engaged in helping out here. But I hesitate to say that this is not what one would define as an international terrorist or domestic terrorist act. There's somebody that wanted to make a statement. Law enforcement is now clearly trying to find out what, in fact, was the motive behind this. That's part of their investigation. I believe that law enforcement has a lot more than they've led on to here, and I think the video cameras throughout that area are going to be very beneficial and helpful.
Charles, pick up on what he just said there. What about a motive? Any sense at this point?
Yeah, they're good points. It could be anything. It could be, we know that critical infrastructure was impacted in terms of communications. There's an AT&T location on that block. We know that that impacted 911. We know that there was a call prior to the explosion about shots fired. Was that a way to have an overwhelming law enforcement response to the location? In other words, was it some type of a setup or an ambush? Now you've got the primary explosive concern to worry about, and then law enforcement has a secondary concern, which we saw them searching for earlier. So really, this can go a number of ways in terms of motive. But to Ted's point, he's right. This could be a lone wolf actor that chose to utilize terrorist tactics here in terms of a vehicle explosive device and carried out the attack here, but has no direct tie to any domestic or international groups.
Let's play for our audience what the Nashville police chief had to say about it, and I'll get Ted to react to it.
We're sweeping the downtown area just as a precaution to make sure that everyone is safe and that any service that needed, we can provide that. And so with that said, we don't feel there's any concern in the downtown area of anything else right now.
Ted, your response to that?
Mike, I think the chief is signaling to people in the community there that they are pretty well secure and safe. I think, as I've said before, that law enforcement has a great deal more than they've let on to out there. And so as a result of that, they may, and I'm not saying they do, but they may very well have a suspect or suspects in their eyesight right now. I would have to believe that they know who's the owner of that vehicle, whether it was a rental vehicle, and they would have to know certainly who drove it there, and they've got press video feed that shows who got out of that vehicle, if anybody got out of that vehicle. And I say that simply because there was supposedly a recording that was sent to the law enforcement from that vehicle 15 minutes before the explosion. If that materialized, there could be a possibility that someone perished in that vehicle. We do not know that. That is clearly a part of the investigation at this stage.
Charles, we have a few seconds left, but your reaction to a recording telling people, if you can hear this, get out?
Yeah, it's all very interesting, right? I think it ties to motive, what the intent is. You could have had a lone actor or small group here that was very focused on hitting a specific target in that neighborhood and actually did have some real concerns about the immediate impact on human life. But the interesting thing is, if that's the case, then why use an explosive device so large? I mean, we're looking at over 20 buildings that have been ruled structurally inefficient right now. So, I mean, we're talking about a large volume of materials here that caused a rather large crime scene. And like Ted said earlier, we're very lucky that this occurred on the day that it did and the time that it did.
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thanks for your time and your analysis.
My pleasure.
Up next, a former high-ranking FBI official explains what investigators are doing to solve this mystery. Welcome back to our special coverage. You just listened to what appears to be the explosion that rocked downtown Nashville first thing this morning. Fox has not independently verified the video. Breaking right now, the Associated Press is reporting that sources have told them authorities have found human remains in the vicinity of the explosion in downtown Nashville. At this hour, police are asking for your help with more information on this RV. If you have any information, they are asking you to call Crime Stoppers. Right now, the focus moves to the investigation. On the phone, I have former Assistant FBI Director Chris Swecker with more on where the investigation goes from here. Good evening, Chris. I know it's still early, but what's your initial read, Chris, based on your experience?
Good evening. Well, we're 10 hours into this now, and the first couple hours would have been spent securing the crime scene, making sure that it's a very large crime scene is secure and everybody's out of that area. Making sure there are no secondary devices. I would say by now the first thing they're looking for is the vehicle identification number or the tag on the car, or any paraphernalia, anything you can find that might identify people that are associated with the car. They'll be looking. One team will be looking for videos, and this will be an FBI-led effort, by the way, until they rule out terrorism. There'll be another team processing the scene forensically, looking for the type of high explosive, swabbing nearby areas and parts to see what kind of explosive was used. They'll be looking for the detonator device, pieces of it, whether it was remotely detonated or detonated by a timer. So there's a lot of teams divided up here, each one specializing in a certain area, and then all that information will funnel into one place and try to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Chris, let me get you to react to this breaking news from the Associated Press about the possibility human remains were found somewhere around the scene. Is it possible this was all a very elaborate suicide?
That's a possibility. The car was parked there supposedly at 1:30 in the morning. The detonation was around 6:30. It could have been an accidental detonation, premature, or someone was trying to commit suicide, or it could. We don't have enough details. It could have been someone that was nearby.
Let's play what the FBI is saying there at the scene from earlier today.
The FBI stands with the city of Nashville today in this very tragic Christmas Day event. This is our city too. We live here, we work here, and we're putting everything we have into finding who was responsible for what's happened here today. Please tell us what you know. We need your leads, we need your help.
So that, Matt Foster, the FBI Assistant Special Agent. Chris, can you translate what he was saying for us, not obviously wanting to tip his hand too much?
Well, this is a sort of a belt and suspenders approach to this investigation. That is, they'll gather as much information as they can on their own, but they sure would need would appreciate some assist from the general public. Has anybody seen that vehicle? I think what they're really looking for, that's a pretty distinctive RV. Mm-hmm. Someone has seen that RV. Once you get it out there, someone is going to call in if they haven't already. And I would go out on a limb here and say that I think the FBI and the investigative team here are on to some very strong leads as we speak, and they're very astutely not putting that out right now.
Chris, that recording telling people if they can hear it to evacuate, what does that tell you about the suspect behind this attack?
Well, it makes, from my background, I spent some time in Iraq working bombings there. I mean, terrorists are looking for mass casualties. Right. You don't put out a warning and say get out of the area if you're trying to inflict mass casualties here. The time of day also, obviously 6:30 in the morning for the detonation. It just tells me that this is more of a domestic matter. It's either a criminal matter, an elaborate suicide, as you mentioned, mm-hmm. or a crime. So maybe somebody had a beef against AT&T or a nearby building, disgruntled employee. There are quite a few possibilities here, but I would hedge here and rule out international terrorism.
Fascinating. Chris Wecker, we thank you for your time and your analysis. Have a wonderful evening, sir.
Thank you.
Next, a live report from the ground in Nashville as we learn there may have been human remains found near the site of this explosion. We continue to get more information on the RV explosion in Nashville, including word that human remains have been found near the explosion site. Let's head there now. Correspondent Charles Watson is on the ground in the Music City. Good evening, Charles.
Hey, good evening, Mike. We're about a quarter of a mile up the road from where that massive explosion went off this morning. You can see there's still police presence just down the road from us, but they've essentially blocked off that explosion area for safety and investigative reasons, and you'll understand why when you take a look at this surveillance video we got of this explosion early this morning. You can hear that warning people to evacuate the area, and then moments later you see the RV explode into flames. Right now, authorities are looking for any information they can find about the explosion. Not too long ago, Metro Nashville Police released this photo of the RV. They say it arrived at 2nd Avenue North in downtown Nashville around 1:22 this morning before police say it was deliberately blown up, and you can see the damage caused by the massive explosion in this video taken by a resident. We're told trees were knocked down, windows blown out. The force of the blast also causing structural damage to several buildings in the area. Now, Metro Nashville Police had originally responded to reports of shots fired around 5:30 local time this morning. When officers arrived, they say they saw that suspicious RV and say it was playing a recording warning that a bomb would detonate in 15 minutes. Soon after, as you saw a few moments ago, the RV exploded. Police say it's unclear at the moment, caused that explosion. We are hearing reports that an individual was inside during the explosion. Police are obviously investigating that right now, but out of an abundance of caution, they've brought in bomb-sniffing dogs to search the area to see if there are any more devices nearby. We're also told 3 people were injured in that explosion and transported to area hospitals. At least one of those victims is expected to be just fine and be released later tonight. The Justice Department has diverted resources to this scene. The FBI and ATF are leading this investigation with more law enforcement officials to come. And Mike, obviously it is a Christmas miracle of some sorts that more people weren't injured in that massive explosion this morning. This is downtown area, a big tourist area with lots of bars and restaurants that people usually frequent. Obviously with the pandemic going on, that probably wasn't the case last night and probably worked out for the best, Mike.
And Charles, we're just getting word that a curfew is going into effect for this evening, undoubtedly to protect residents from possibility of any further trouble. But we will obviously stay on the case. Glad to have you on the scene there. Charles Watson, many thanks. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines this Christmas. President Trump spent his Christmas golfing, while Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the bipartisan coronavirus relief and omnibus bill has been sent to the president's desk. It is still unknown if the president will sign the bill without an increase of direct payments, checks of $2,000 to Americans. If he does not, a government shutdown will come on December 29th. A storm packing a mix of heavy winds and rain knocked out power to thousands across the Northeast this morning. Winds reached more than 60 miles per hour in some areas, adding to the woes are rising temperatures, accelerating the melting of snow, making for flooding danger. The Israeli military says Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip fired 2 rockets toward southern Israel today, but air defenses intercepted them. There have been no reports of casualties or damage. No Palestinian group in the Hamas ruled Gaza, claimed responsibility for the rocket fire, which broke months of cross-border calmness. Queen Elizabeth II delivered a heartfelt message of hope in her Christmas address, praising the indomitable spirit of those who have risen to the challenges of the pandemic. The Queen expressing sympathy for the ordeal of the past few months, while also laying out hope of a return to normal. The UK has an official coronavirus-related death toll of just more than 70,000. We are continuing to follow the developments out of Nashville. We'll be right back with more after this.
It was clearly done when nobody was going to be around.
Why do you think that would be?
We'll wait for the investigators in the courts. But it was grateful that there not more people were around. If this was, it would be a different message if it was, 5 p.m. on a Friday.
Nashville's mayor with still plenty of questions after this early morning RV explosion in downtown Nashville, a very popular area for tourists, and so many questions still to be answered by law enforcement in the hours ahead. Let's bring in our panel. Josh Kraushaar is politics editor for National Journal. Susan Ferricchio, chief congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and president. Panel, welcome. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Mike.
Merry Christmas, Mike.
Tom, start us off. Your thoughts on what we've seen there in Nashville and the reaction from both local, state, and federal law enforcement to this crisis on Christmas morning.
Yeah, shocking event, cowardly act. And right now, we're still in the sort of the fog of war where, more questions than answers right now. A lot to be uncovered as far as the motivation of the person, who the person was. Just so many questions as to why someone would go about doing this. And as the mayor mentioned, did it in a way that could have injured a lot more people, didn't. It is a miracle that only a few people were injured, and hopefully they'll all be better.
Susan, your thoughts on the reaction of law enforcement jumping into action on Christmas morning, as they always do, putting everything else aside and putting the safety and really honoring and serving their community?
Right. And I think when it comes to law enforcement, the fact that the FBI and the ATF are involved will probably speed along the investigation, because they have so much expertise in dealing with something very unusual like this, an enormous explosion that could have injured a lot more people in a town with a population of nearly 700,000 people. Truly a miracle that more people weren't injured or killed. But now we have the video of the RV. Now there's, that's going to go out to the general population. Someone may come forward. You heard today law enforcement asking the public to call in with tips. That suggests to me that they're starting really from nothing and they need some information. And usually what happens in situations like this is a tip will come in the coming days when people get a look at that video. Someone will know this person. If it was in fact a suicide, someone will have a connection there. That's where the first clue will be. And it could be one of those cases where hopefully they're able to quickly close it and figure out what happened rather than have to be so worried about it occurring again somewhere, because it's still a great mystery as to why it happened in the first place.
Yeah, I think the good news is it's a very unique looking vehicle. It's not your generic mid-size rental car. Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think Susan is right that there's so many unknowns right now to the point where we haven't had a reaction from the president on Twitter. We've had a pretty muted response from both the administration and the Biden transition. And, we don't know whether we've heard this hour that there may have been remains near the vehicle. It may have been the suspect, the perpetrator. Was this a suicide attack?
Right.
It was in front of the AT&T building. Was there a political intent involved with this attack? And the timing to do it on Christmas morning with the likelihood of not many people around, but sending an awful lot of explosives and doing a whole lot of damage. It really raises the question of what this perpetrator was all about.
Tom, understandably, we saw Nashville's mayor on the scene. We know President Trump's been briefed. We know that President-elect Joe Biden's been briefed as well. When should we hear something more from our national leadership about the situation there in Nashville? Is it time for a comforter-in-chief type statement?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. Again, without knowing much, if anything, about what's going on, it'd be tough for either Biden or Trump to really say anything. I mean, obviously, they both thanked the first responders, right, and law enforcement. They have done a heroic job thus far under difficult circumstances on a holiday, and so I think that's sort of where we stand. I think as we learn more and we find out more, I mean, I think you might hear something from Trump. Because he has said some things in the past, like we will find and bring these people to justice, or this person, whoever it might be, a sort of law and order message. But until we know more, it's really hard to say.
Susan, your thoughts looking ahead? Do you expect the president may decide to go to Nashville on his way back from Mar-a-Lago at some point once we know a whole lot more about what went on, if arrests have been made or if the case has been cleared otherwise?
Here's what I think is going to happen. I think the FBI and ATF may be able to determine quickly whether or not this was an act of terrorism. If they do see signs of that, then you're more likely to see the president get involved, because it's something that affects us all sort of on a national scale if terrorism is at work here. But this has all the signs of something that may not be terrorism, because normally a hallmark of that kind of attack is not to warn people. And as we know, there was that very strange warning coming from the RV ahead of time. The timing of the explosion, the location of the explosion was not set for maximum damage and maximum injury. So it kind of suggests that this may be something different. It may be, as we're all guessing now, some kind of a suicide. If it's something like that, I don't know if you would see the president get involved. I know Biden issued a statement. I don't know that you're going to see the president get involved at that level if this really is not found to be an act of terrorism.
Josh, a few thoughts from you in the final seconds we have?
Yeah, I mean, usually the president does play a comforter-in-chief type role. Thankfully, there were no fatalities aside. There is the remains that may or may not be the suspect, but it could have been worse. Thank God it wasn't in terms of human life. I think you'll probably will see the president once we find out more facts get ahead of the story. But look, he hasn't been playing an active role since the election, so it'll be interesting to see how actively and aggressively he plays a role after this attack.
All right, political panel, nice job getting us started. We'll see you next hour. Our panel of experts is back after the break. looking live at Nashville at this hour, where we expect to hear from the FBI at the top of the hour. This after we learn human remains may have been found near this morning's blast site. Let's get more analysis on the Nashville explosion from our experts, former Secret Service Supervisory Special Agent and former DHS Advisor Charles Marino. Ted Williams is a former homicide detective, and Joey Jones, retired United States Marine Corps bomb technician. Joey, since we didn't get you earlier, let's get your thoughts on what we're seeing there in Nashville.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what we know is that there was an explosion. You know, we try to push more into it and dissect it and try to say what kind of materials we use, things like that. We're doing the job of people that are on the ground tasked with actually investigating this. The one thing I will say, I've talked to other experts, and I believe this was probably not an actual explosive, probably either some sort of fuel or pyrotechnic, which is just as bad and obviously just as deadly. But what that means is, you know, whatever it is they did to cause this explosion, that allows the investigators to go on kind of a different route when it comes to tracking their purchases and backtracking their steps and knowing what type of person and what type of knowledge base they had in doing this.
Ted, as a former police officer, we understand a curfew's in place for that immediate area from tonight until sometime on Sunday. Does that make a whole lot of sense at this point?
Yes, it certainly does, until they can try to determine what was the motive and who was behind this. But I got to tell you, from the last time we've spoken, Mike, to now, and now finding out that human remains may have been found in the area, it gives me more of a perhaps understanding of what perhaps may be taking place here. And I really now believe it was not domestic terrorist related or internationally terrorist related. I think that clearly, if human remains were found, that those human remains could be associated with the person who actually drove that car there. My rationale for that RV there, my rationale for making that representation is that we know that when the law enforcement got on the scene there, that they heard what they believed to be a recording warning people to get out of the area. And so as a result of that, people were able to move away from the area. And I think whoever did this was not interested in harming people, but in making a statement. And it could very well be the person who drove that vehicle there that those human remains belong to.
Charles, you have an extensive federal law enforcement background. What are your expectations as you look ahead to a briefing at the top of the hour from the FBI there on the scene in Nashville? Are they going to try to lower the temperature a bit from obviously a very anxious community there?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, it's a very large crime scene here. Now you have the discovery of the body, the remains that may or may not be the suspect. So there's still a lot more work that needs to take place here. They need to figure out, was this just a suicide? Was it a targeted attack on critical infrastructure or another intent there where the suspect, based on an ideology and cause, decided to take his own life in conjunction with that? I think they're going to still play it a little bit close to the vest here, as there's still a lot more work to do. And I think the discovery of the remains just makes it a little more complicated in that sense in terms of releasing information too soon.
Joey, I covered the Oklahoma City bombing back in the mid-'90s. What's striking to me about this is there was an effort there to take as many human lives as possible. In this one, it seems like the perpetrator wanted to reduce the loss of human life. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, this was a tactic we saw with the IRA back when that was a big happening thing. The Weather Underground a little bit. When, you know, you say whether or not this was domestic terrorism, well, something blew up in society, so it is going to terrorize people. Now what we're talking about is whether or not that was the intent of the person. Is this a personal vendetta against a specific entity, maybe commercial entity, or is it a political statement? And the truth is, when you blow something up, you're either trying to cause destruction or send a message. And it's up to the investigators to decide the motive of the person or persons that did this. What I'll tell you, in the Oklahoma City bombing, something used there was ammonium nitrate and fuel oxidizer, an actual explosive. And just give you an idea of what could have happened, only about 1/5 of the explosive there actually blew up. And it was the dispersion of the rest of it that led to Timothy McVeigh getting caught. In this specific instance, it doesn't appear there's an actual blast crater. It doesn't look like there's large infrastructure damage. And that's what leads me to believe perhaps this wasn't an actual explosive, which means the person doing it may or may not have had as much understanding or knowledge or resources. And all of those are things that investigators will use to find out who this is and what exactly they were trying to accomplish.
Ted, we're running short on time, but the local law enforcement focus is protecting and serving that immediate community and trying to keep folks calm?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why we should have a certain utmost respect for these law enforcement officers that put their lives on the line every day. Because the law enforcement officers here, once they found out about this bomb, allegedly, they immediately evacuated that area and doing their job, and they did their job very well.
Charles, final thought in the remaining few seconds we have?
Yeah, bigger picture, we still had a very large explosive device go off in a vehicle in a major U.S. city. So I think we need to look at the explosive materials awareness program that the Department of Homeland Security runs in coordination with the FBI and make sure that we're doing everything there regarding suspicious purchases of explosive materials.
We need to leave that there. Panel, thanks very much. When we come back, more from the ground in Nashville as we await another briefing from the FBI, plus the day's political news from Washington.